And I was thinking about what you were saying, and I was thinking about, you were talking about like how are we consistent? Like how do we really have that consistency in each market? And I think that it's a double-edged sword because like when it comes to certain design aspects and it comes to certain requests for finishes, the reason we say no to certain things is because of that. Like how can we deliver, an average build time that we want to be in 180, 220 days, and how can we negotiate with our subs to where they can go to the job and do it right the first time? How can we build something to where the design doesn't cause a lot of issues? I think that some of the reason we say no is to benefit the client. I did want to highlight that is that, we know the parameters in which we can deliver consistency. And we try to manage those parameters because if we go way too crazy out in left or right field, we know it will affect the client experience because we're doing something that we're not comfortable doing, or maybe selling something that we don't really know a person that we trust to do that. So, but as far as my team, like I was saying, Billy's involved in the front end of the process. So when somebody onboards and that site visit is scheduled, Billy assigns the project manager based on territories. We have these giant maps. People don't realize as many counties as we're in, figuring out quadrants and territories and, who's closest and what job is on their way to their other job. Billy has this giant map on his wall with highlighted sections. So the first thing we do is figure out who the project manager would be on this job. And we have 10 days to do a site visit. That's the time that we've committed to with the sales team. Um, and then we have this full SOP of what we expect from a site visit. So pictures, videos, all these things that everybody uses to understand this land. Even our designers. So like when designing a plan, if they have a question about, how the land is laid out, we have a minimum amount of pictures and videos that our guys take when they go out there and they might say, "Oh, that makes sense." So there's also a long questionnaire. Like, are there power lines in the way? Is the site accessible for construction? All these things to make sure that all those boxes are checked, that we go out there and we give a good analysis on what we see. So we're involved in the front end of the process there. And then once preliminary plans come back, we go through the same process where a grading quote is scheduled. And then we have a deadline that Billy manages to make sure that we get the grading quote back. And then we have a two-step process where purchasing and Billy have to sign off on every grading quote. We look at the videos and pictures to make sure that what the grader is quoting us makes sense, to make sure they're not like, you need 200 loads of dirt. And we look at the pictures and we're like, dude, this is a flat lot. So we look at all the videos and pictures and make sure that what the grader is saying needs to happen makes sense. And we make sure that the grader breaks everything down, is descriptive on what he's charging and why, all the way down to machine time, what machines you're bringing to the lot. And then once purchasing and Billy give the thumbs up, then they upload that quote back into the Asana portal where the sales agent can share it with the client. Um, Once people exit design or get close to the final revision, I have Heath that does plan review. So he goes in and he looks at it and he makes sure that everything lines up with how we build, that there's not a truss in a window or a beam that's spanned further than what code or engineering allows it to span. Because sometimes designers don't always understand how things translate from paper to field. We understand because we've done it so many times. So it goes through a process where Heath looks at it and he says, "Hey, I feel like this beam is spanning a little too far," and then we make adjustments there. And then he does the same thing when the proposal is signed. He checks and makes sure everything lines up with the plans. Make sure everything that makes sense. And then once people enter finance, there's two departments that I manage that are involved. So we have permitting, where Jennifer starts the process of permitting. And this is why the documents that clients are responsible for are so important because for us to get a permit quickly and break ground, there's so many things we need. We need the well permit, we need the septic permit, we need, all the information for the 911 address, all these different things. If those stones are left unturned, it becomes Jennifer's job to do it, and we lose time in permitting. But the same day that they go into finance, when Jennifer in permitting takes it, the purchasing team starts. So that's when we start combing through all the selections, everything that was chosen, and we start sending out bid requests to all the subs with, detailed description of this job. Hey, they're getting matte black this, there's this many fixtures, and lining up who the subcontractors are going to be for that job. So I think that it is important for people to hear that sometimes when you exit finance, if we don't quite have your permit yet and you do your pre-construction meeting with us and there's this lull of time that goes by where we haven't scraped dirt, there's 3 or 4 people at our office every day negotiating, labor and materials on the job. So we don't ever stop working on a job. Even when a week goes by and there's a cabinet delay and nothing's happened, we're still working on purchase orders. We're still doing things on that job. You just might not see somebody on that job.